This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to Unstoppable today. We have Jared Graybeal. Jared, thank you so much for being here, mate.
And thanks for having me.
Now, mate, you've got a really interesting story. I was looking in when I was having a chat with the producers before we brought you on. You're the CEO of Superfit Foods and E3, which we'll find out more about that in a moment. But you've had quite the story. You've had quite the upbringing, quite, I guess you could say, the birth into the business realm and the entrepreneurial realm. But something I'm always curious that I ask all of my guests, mate, is if you went to a dinner party and you knew no one there, there's 8 other people there all sitting around a table, and all of a sudden, you know, everyone sits down, the room goes very quiet, and the attention all of a sudden goes to you, and everyone's looking at you, and someone just says, you know, very casually, "So Jared, what do you do?" How do you answer that question, mate?
Well, it's a little different now, and you wouldn't know this, but about a month ago, I officially sold Superfit Foods.
Congratulations, mate. Well done.
Thank you. Definitely a great exit. And very, very pleased with how I did with that. So my answer is a little bit different now. Sometimes I stumble over it being an entrepreneur, but now I'm struggling with it because I am a consultant. You know, I own E3, which is a consulting agency. And so now I'm kind of juggling, like, do I say consultant? Do I say entrepreneur? I'm not sure what it's like where you're at, but here that's kind of a buzzword. It doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
And so I still haven't figured it out.
Mate, that's fine. And that's why I asked that question, because there's not a lot of people that really do feel comfortable answering that question. And it's funny because over here, it's very similar. The word entrepreneur, most people who, you know, title themselves, if they're at a networking event, as an entrepreneur, normally classifies them as a broke hobbyist. You know, someone who's, you know, chasing a dream but hasn't quite got there yet, hasn't worked out a label that fits anything other than that one, which is quite broad. But, mate, you've got a pretty interesting story. So when you go back in your timeline, where does your story begin for you, mate?
Oh, man, I could start from like age 2, but I won't. And so really for me, I guess my entrepreneurial roots start around the time that I was 11 years old. Growing up, so I'll fast forward some of the early childhood stuff, but around 2 or 3, transitioned from living with my mom to my dad. And for about 10 years, my mom wasn't really in the picture. So me and my brother were raised by a single dad, a young dad. And I bounced to 5 different elementary schools. I got kicked out of 4 of them. So I had some issues adapting there. And then finally in middle school, I got to stay in the same middle school. So in 6th grade, I kind of planted some roots. And on the way to school, me and these twins, they were also from the other side of the tracks. Like myself, we were somewhat scrappy, low-income neighborhood, poor white kids. And they were really good at stealing, and they took pride in it. And I was not, and I wasn't that type of guy. I always think people are watching me. So, but anyways, on the way to school, they would steal a bag of popsicles. I would distract the cashier, and then we get to school, and I would sell it because I'm good at that. And we'd sell like 30 cents a pop or something. Make about $30 because it's 100 bag of popsicles. And we did that for a couple weeks. And I got to the point where I had enough money that I could just buy my own bag of popsicles. Even at a young age, I was convicted with the whole stealing thing. So I didn't love it. So I figured, well, now I can buy my own. And so I created early arbitrage, right? Like buying and selling at a higher price. Because we didn't have allowance. We had free lunch. But we didn't know it was free lunch because we just thought everybody got free lunch until the day I realized that there was kids that were eating different things at lunch. So I wanted to buy the pizza that they could afford or the spicy chicken sandwiches. And that turned into something a little different very quickly. Later on in 6th grade, I smoked weed for the first time, fell in love with it. I don't want to say I got hooked because I'm not sure it's addictive, but fell in love with it. I think more or less because I got to hang out with some older kids and needed money to buy pot. So I used the popsicle money to buy a little pot. And then next thing you know, some kids are asking me for a nickel bag here and there. And so I remember the first time I sold 5 nickel bags from $20 worth of weed, which made me $5. And I thought, how does this work? You know, and I'm always been good at math. And I thought, well, I can buy a 30 bag, keep some for myself, sell some, make $10, have money for the weekend, have free weed. And then it turned into 50, 200, 500. And that was from the time I was 11 till about 17 and a half. That was a progressive career option for me. And of course, back then in Florida, it was certainly frowned upon. It's still illegal in Florida, but half the country it's legal now. So that's probably a career you can pursue in other parts of America. So that was my early entrepreneurial journey, and I was really, really good at it. I took a lot of pride in it. I moved out at 16. I got my own place, and school was easy for me. So after school, it was kids, their parents, the teachers, everyone buying pot from me.
Wow.
Yeah,
so you were the man. You were the one. You were supplying teachers, parents.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite a position of influence within your community.
It was. I kind of had it made. Senior year was a good year for me.
And you were good at school as well. You're quite academic.
Yeah, I was. It's so weird, man. I was one of those kids, and even like middle school, that got pulled out of class to go to Alpha, and I didn't really understand what it was, but it was just for kids with better grades and better reading skills and stuff. And so in high school, I was in advanced classes too, and a lot of that stuff was easy for me. I took it for granted. I probably could have gotten in a much better school and all that stuff, but it was just do the bare minimum, get A's, and my dad told me from a young age, if you want to go to college, you got to pay for it yourself. So in Florida, we have something called Bright Future Scholarship. You got to get like a 3.6 or more GPA average or something. So that was my minimum. Just get that so I can get a full ride to college, and I did. But after school, man, it was sell and smoke pot, watch the 300 movie over and over and over again or something like that. And I had my own place. So it was cool. People were just in and out, staying the night, bringing me food. It was cool.
And then it all came tumbling down.
Yeah. Like most good drug dealing stories, there's an end to it. And so I was 17 and a half. It was like towards the end of my senior year, and the cops had this whole rap, and they had a warrant, and the whole cliche movie thing. Went through the whole house, took all the weed, took all the money, and I got charged with felony possession, attempted to distribute, something like that, a felony possession and selling narcotics, stuff like that. But I was a minor, and as a minor, I had been arrested maybe 6 or 7 times. I was in and out of juvie, on and off of probation for different things, from trespassing to battery to cigarette possession, stuff like that, when you're a kid. But this changed a little bit because I thought, well, I'm 17, I'm good to go. They ended up charging me as an adult. And so that was different. It was an eye opener. And they'd waited until towards the end of my senior year to really convict me. And I spent the summer after my senior year in jail. So
wow. How you want to spend your summer after senior year, yeah?
All my friends are packing up, going to college, and I anticipated going to the University of Florida, but that didn't happen. I ended up going to jail and spent about 2.5 months in there. Then by the time I got out, all my friends were gone. My college opportunities were gone. Ended up enrolling at a local community college, and I spent 2 years on house arrest when I got out of jail.
Yeah, right. That sounds like it was a pretty humbling fall from grace.
Yeah.
And were you with time served? Were you in county? Were you in what was the period of time served like?
So I was in county, which I would argue is worse than prison.
Yeah.
And the reason for that obviously is because you're not supposed to be in county a long time, so they make it very, very horrible. So
for the people in Australia who don't know what county is, that's the equivalent of a remand center. It's where you go before you get processed and put into a big jail.
Yeah. So in county jail in Florida, especially in Polk County where I'm from, is like, I remember reading it was like rated the worst county jail you can be in the country or something.
Yeah, right.
So scared straight would be a great way to explain it, because growing up for me, I had a chip on my shoulder. It was obvious we were poor. I was the kid growing up drawing a Nike symbol on my socks. I remember getting in trouble because it got in the wash, and I got my butt whooped for getting ink all over the clothes in the wash because I was just trying to fit in. And so I always just had this, man, life sucks. It's too hard. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get ahead. And I was also small. I was 95 pounds going into high school. I graduated at 130, very scrappy, because being a white kid in the projects, like you got to be scrappy. So I was I was very friendly. So I had a big social circle. I wasn't like an asshole, but to the system and to to the world and even to God. I was like, I didn't believe in God for that period of time in my life. And jail was an awakening, because it was like, man, I thought life was bad. Jail's bad.
Do you remember the moment where you got in to county, and maybe it was a series of moments or a moment where you just went, man, something's got to change? Like, was there like a trigger for that?
Yeah, there's a couple small ones and one big one. One of the first small ones was like 3 or 4 days into jail. I was dating a girl, and that was about to go to Daytona Beach to go to school. And she was like one of the hottest girls in high school. And like, I took a lot of pride in that. And on the phone, she was like, Jared, it's over, right? Like, you're in jail and I'm going to college. And I was like, oh, that sucks. Like I thought when I got out, this would work out, and it didn't. So that sucked. And then one night, it was about a week into being in jail, and my mom had written me a letter. We rehabbed our relationship around 11 or 12 years old. And so she wrote me a letter. I knew that I'd cry if I read it. And so I waited until I had the opportunity to get alone, just in case I cried, which I was pretty sure I would. And so county jail is a dorm room, basically. It's like an L-shaped dorm room. And I remember the night, like, vividly. It was the NBA Finals, and the Celtics were playing the Heat, like Game 5 probably. And everyone's downstairs looking up at this really small TV, like 20 feet up, watching the game. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to read this letter. So I pull the letter out from underneath my pillow, read it, and my mom calls me baby boy. And, of course, I'm like, I'm not bawling, but, like grown man crying. And so that sucked, man. I knew that I had let my mom down, and my mom had been in and out of prison. And so it was, growing up for me, the bar was really low. And so I thought at this point I had really fell below the bar, and I didn't think that I could with my family and my upbringing. So that really sucked for me, to let someone down that I really didn't think that I could let down. And so I kind of wiped my face off and put the letter back, and I'm walking on the second floor, just kind of back and forth on the second floor. And I walk by a room full of inmates, and like 16 people in a room that fits like 6 people. And I just glance in, and they all glance back at me, and I'm like, I want nothing to do with whatever prison escape they're planning. Like, why is there 16 dudes in a room? So I just glance in and I glance away, and they're like, hey, homie. And I just kind of look back in. They're like, do you believe in God? And I was like, no, I don't. They're like, well, he believes in you. Come on in here. And I was like, I got nothing else to do, man. So I went in and I sat down, and it was really different, because they made a space for me. And then we preached a sermon, and it was, I'm not sure where your faith lies or anything like that. But it was just one of those messages that speaks right to your soul. And I gave my life to God in that moment. It was probably the first time in my life that I had felt like the tangible presence of a creator. I remember going to church as a kid and like raising your hand every single time. But I had no idea what it meant. And my dad didn't really pressure us either way. He didn't believe. And so I thought, if these guys are willing to show me grace, there must be someone bigger than us. So I started to read the Bible at that point. I gave my life to Christ, and I became a Christian. The unfortunate thing about salvation in jail or prison is that it's not a great place for sanctification, which is what we consider to be growing in your faith. Because the next day, those same guys are stealing, they're fighting, they're cheating in cards, right? They're not really setting the best example of like how to walk out the Christian lifestyle. They're just basically acting like everybody else that I had grown up with and spent time in the trap house with, So not a lot changed after that, but my faith did. And so that was a really big pivotal moment. And so I began to live try to live for a purpose versus for my own self gratification only. And then one more experience in jail happened. So at this point I had begun to read the Bible and think more about like esoteric mindset kind of stuff. Like what am I here for? What does God want me to do with my life? Thinking about other people more. And I quickly became known as like the in-house trainer, because after I quit smoking weed right before jail, I started working out like every day. I had always liked it, but weed was like my number one thing, and I'd get some push-ups and some curls in if I wasn't stoned. So in jail is all I had to do, but it's not like the prison movies where you have bench presses and all that stuff, basketball courts. You just make stuff up inside. It's like COVID workouts. And I was pretty creative, and I would come up with stuff every day. We'd do pull-ups from the second floor. We'd fill a pillowcase up with shampoo bottles and do curls with it and stuff. And so one day a guy was like, Jared, you should be a personal trainer when you get out of here. And I didn't know what that was. So I asked him, I was like, what is that? And he's like, they pay people to train them just like you're doing now. And I was like, that's it. Like, that's what God wants me to do with my life.
Yeah. Wow.
So when I got out.
So you knew in that moment, that's what you were supposed to do next.
Yeah, man, I thought I'm going to become a trainer, and then I'm going to open a gym, because I've always wanted to own a business, because I just like to lead. And I think I have just a genetically inclined business acumen. For whatever reason, I've always been good at orchestrating projects, and just like even 11th grade, getting James and Modi to steal while I get the cash register, and then I sell the popsicles and give them a small piece of the money, and I take the rest of the money, So when I got out, and this is 13 years ago or something, I hooked up the dial-up connection on the computer and asked Jeeves how to become a personal trainer, and really just follow the steps. And it wasn't super easy. It took me about a year to get into the fitness industry. I did telemarketing for a while when I got out of jail and when I was on house arrest, but I step by step got into the first Gold's Gym, and then got promoted, and it's kind of all she wrote.
And at what point did you realize that there was more? Because it seems to me like this got you to the next stage of the journey before you got into, because I'm going to assume at some point you realized that as you train people, and I don't know, you tell me, like what was it that led you getting into the food side of the business? Because I know for me, going back a million years ago, I was a personal trainer. And one of the things that I discovered is, you can give the best advice, you can give people the best workouts, but if you can't support them to make better decisions about what food they put in their mouth, they're never going to out-train a bad diet.
Yeah. So for me, to answer your first question, when did I know that there was more, was when I sort of had that duality of like the God experience and the personal training experience. And it opened my eyes up to like, I don't have to be a career criminal for the rest of my life. Maybe I can be like my friends that pursue legitimate careers, that go to college and do all that stuff. And so that was eye-opening for me, because it showed me my potential a little bit. And so of course in my life, it's like you level up, and then you see the potential for the next level, and you level up and you see like a greater chasm for your potential. But as far as the Superfit Foods, the inception story for Superfit Foods, I had gotten a job in sales at a gym, and then became the sales manager, and then became a GM for LA Fitness, which is a nationwide health club here in the States, and ended up moving to Jacksonville in 2012, and did that for about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. And at that point in time, I really wanted to go out on my own. I had developed the skill to outmanage 2 or 3 levels up in the management, line. I was working for guys that I thought were idiots, and they're making 2, 3, 4 times the money I am. And they're making that money because I'm doing such a good job developing my team within the health club, because they would use my gym as like a feeder store to put managers in other stores. And I thought, well, that's what the VP should do, not me. And then the VP gets paid for it. So I figured if I'm this good, I should really figure it out on my own and open up a gym. And then that'll really prove to me whether or not I know what I'm doing. So in January of 2015, I had written a business plan and pitched an investor from Lakeland, Florida, where I'm from originally. And he approved $250,000. So I took the leap of faith. And the last weekend of January, I moved back home to Lakeland, Florida. Unfortunately, that weekend, after celebrating, Sunday morning, he calls me and he says, Jared, I have to back out of the investment. And I didn't know that people could do this. This is my first rodeo.
Yeah.
And so I said, Peter, what do you mean? Like this, I just moved home. I quit my job. He said, I'm really sorry. I can't do it. And so I had to cancel the equipment that was coming, had to cancel the build out of this unit, and didn't really have plan B. I didn't really know. Now my life is different. I make plan B, C, E, D, E, but back then I was 25. I was on fire, driven by faith and my experience. And so I looked across the table at brunch with my buddy and I said, hey man, can I stay with you for a couple months? And he said, yeah, you've got 3 months. And I said, cool. I love the deadline. And I reached out to another friend of mine that used to work for me at the gym. He was now a manager. And I said, hey man, I just want to train. I'm back home. And he said, great. I don't have any clients for you, but if you want to come here, open up your book and start, you can train and we can work out a split. And I said, that's great. So born and raised in Lakeland, I wasn't really hesitant. So I spent 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. in this Gold's Gym. Within a month, I was fully booked. I did a bunch of free sessions. I sold 90% of them. And I was full-time within a month. Really, really happy. One of the highlights of my life. And so got to set my own rates. I'm making great money. And then about 2 months into that, I meet who would become my partner at Superfit Foods. And he approaches me. He's an older guy. He owns a supplement shop. And he's got some business experience. And he says, Jared, I heard you wanted to open a gym. Do you still want to do that? And I said, no, I think God's got something different for me. And he was like, well, what else would you do? And I thought, I don't know yet. This is the only time in my life I hadn't really thought about that for a little while. And he's like, well, what about meal prep? At the time, I was a competitive bodybuilder, planning to go pro. I didn't. I took a different route, obviously. I was a nutrition specialist. And all my clients got really great results because I was diligent with following up with them and holding them accountable to eating certain things. I created plans for like, if you got to eat fast food, this is what you should order. I was just really into it. And so he said, what about a meal prep company? You seem to be good with the food stuff. And I thought, seems easy enough. And it wasn't, but we did it anyways. And so about a week later, I came up with the name Superfit Foods. We got incorporated. About 2 weeks into the business, my partner, whose name was Frank, his name is Frank, who was my partner. He would get involved. And about 2 weeks into it, I was like, Frank, don't touch anything. Everything you touch breaks. So let me run the show. And he was cool with it because I did really well. And we grew really fast. We did like 500K the first year, just from my personal connections in the fitness industry in Lakeland. And we doubled the first like 2 years and then expanded into Jacksonville and then expanded nationwide. So that's the inception story of Superfit Foods.
And what did you grow the revenues to before you ended up the exit?
We did 2 million. We finished at just over 2 million last year.
Nice.
The years 4 and 5 were really, really hard to get the same growth trajectory. But of course, it's all relative, right? Because when the numbers grow, it's hard to double them. But we sustained, I think, just around 20% average growth year after year. Bootstrapped, no funding, sold the business debt-free.
Beautiful.
Bought out Frank 2.5 years ago. So it's been a journey, man. A lot of ups and downs. But very happy with how it all culminated in the end.
And when did E3 come on the scene?
So E3 started about 3 years ago, about 2 years into the Superfit journey. And the reason for that is because, again, at the core of me, I'm entrepreneurial. I can't commit to one thing all the time. I can work a full-time thing. Like Superfit was always 50, 60 hours for a long time, but I still had more in me. And people would always reach out, seeing the success with Superfit Foods, and ask me for help. And they'd say, man, Jared, can I take you to coffee? I've got some questions. And, after going to coffee with an acquaintance 2 or 3 times, you're kind of like, man, I got to charge you. Like, we're not best friends, but I want to help. And so
having people pick your brain can be a very expensive exercise.
Yeah. And I remember, it's funny because I think about that different. I asked a guy one time a couple of years ago, can I pick your brain? And he said, it's a really weird idea, you picking my brain. And ever since then, I try not to even say it. It's like a weird thought now. But yeah, people would reach out and ask for help. And so I thought, I need to legitimize this practice. I'll do it the same way I did training. I'll charge per hour, obviously at a premium, and I'll give them practical steps and then hand them the tools. And I thought, what do I want that company to look like? And I've rattled a lot of ideas and names in my brain. And I know I want to encourage people, but I don't want to just be an inspirational speaker. I want to encourage, educate, and empower them. So it's sort of in that order. That's how I go about, that's my teaching style. I encourage people, kind of open them up, educate them, give them the tools, and then empower them to do it on their own. That's hopefully what I aim to do. And so I named it E3.
And so with that, and with what you've done, you've been through this cycle a few times now. So you've built a couple businesses, you've built your own business, you've built a business that you've scaled, you've built a business that you've sold. which for most people is the holy grail of entrepreneurship. Because, a lot of people can get started, a lot of people can build a business, but to take a business to exit, that takes an extra level of, I guess you could say, of organization and follow through. But what I'm curious to know is, now you advise clients, you're more than likely going to go and, do something again, I would assume. But what have you learned? Because there's a whole range of people probably listening to this right now. Some people are starting a business. Some people are already in the business and scaling. And some people are going to be at that stage where they're thinking, what's next? Should I sell or, should I keep building it? So when you have a client that's going to be starting a business, like what are some of the steps that you prepare them for or advise them on? Or suggest for them and go, okay, if you're starting out, here are the top 3, 4, 5, 20 things you need to know. What's some advice you could give someone who's listening to this who's maybe thinking about starting something?
One of the first things that I would say is make sure that whatever you're starting is something you're truly passionate about. And the reason for that is because if you're driven only by the potential profitability, that might take you far enough and you might get lucky enough to see an exit one day. But if things get really, really tough, which they most likely will, especially if you're bootstrapped, you see how volatile the economy can be without us being able to plan or control. If you're not passionate enough, man, you won't have the resilience to push through when you don't see a paycheck for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, when you have to put more of your own personal capital in the business, when you need to take a personal loan to put into the business so you can pay the personal loan off later to keep the business going while you're not getting an income, and then you ask for a rent disbursement. You've got to love what you do, right? And that's a true story for me.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
And so you have to be passionate about it. And everyone says that, but it's true. You could be lucky enough to just start a business for money and make it all the way, but you'd be the outlier. You'd be the unlikely individual.
Can I ask you a question? Because I hear a lot of people say very similar things, especially in the realms of success. It's almost like as a few greats have said, success leaves clues, and oftentimes there's not a lot of new information circulating around when it comes to starting out. And I mean no disrespect with what I'm saying, because I actually want to go a level deeper, because people say you've got to love what you do. You've got to be passionate about what you do. And, sometimes that's difficult when you're not making money. Sometimes that's really difficult when things are really, really hard. But it's a lot easier to do it if you love it than if you're just trying to do it for something that is outside of yourself. But I guess my question, at what point, and do you give any credence or credit to your curiosity? Because it seems to me you're a very smart guy. You understood personal training. You understood a level of managing and creating teams. But at what point did you get curious about the business side? Because it's one thing to be a great personal trainer. It's one thing to be able to run a gym. But to own a gym, to own any business, there's got to be a level of there's got to be a point at which people reach where they go, you know what? Fuck, I'm really good at what I do, but I might, as a technician, but I need to learn more about this business thing. How much credence do you give to your curiosity to try and, not just become a great trainer, but actually to try to work out how to run a business?
So my curiosity, I would give a significant amount of credit to it, because the reason why I end up starting my own business most of the time is because I want to try new things and these companies won't let me. So you have these walls where you're just bouncing off the wall, but your curiosity is held within this bubble, right? The old school way of running businesses, where I know that I have potential to take, I'm running somebody else's gym and, hey, we should really try this and we should hire this person and we should test these things out. And it's like, no, let's stick to the status quo. I can't live with that. And so that's why I ended up leaving the corporate health club world. I thought, man, I really want to do some different things. I think we can treat people differently. I think we can create opportunities for our staff differently. I think if we create good opportunities for our staff, we'll create a better environment for the members, and it creates a virtuous cycle, right? And it's like that mindset got me in a lot of trouble as a manager because I would try new things that weren't authorized. And so for me growing up and even in the business world, my curiosity got me in enough trouble to where I was forced to leave because I wanted to control the environment. Whether it's a curiosity issue or a control issue is irrelevant. It's just what brought me to where I am, So I think it's important. And I think, and you mentioned something about passion being something people talk about. you're right. Passion doesn't pay the bills. So it has to be economically sound. It has to be a capitalistically driven passion that you have, because a lot of passions can make you go broke. And so you have to mix passion with business acumen. And that's why you see a lot of great businesses where there's one really passionate entrepreneur, creative, curious, and then you have a business guy that partnered up with the passionate guy and they created something great. And so sometimes that's what it looks like for somebody else out there. And for me, I happen to be able to use both sides of the brain, I think, right? And so the other thing I would say is financial competency. Growing up broke for me, I was pretty good with money because I didn't have any. So any that I did was budgeted well. It was used. It was stretched over a long period of time. And so the same thing applied to the business. And I think a lot of people growing up maybe that are well off or aren't given the responsibility of balancing their own checkbook at a young age can fail quickly in the business world because you think money's just going to literally fall off the tree, right? Mommy and daddy are going to give you more, and maybe they will, but it won't last forever.
But I've also seen people make the other mistake where they come from nothing and, they're desperate to make more money. Then all of a sudden, they start something, they start making money but then they prioritize that money to other things other than the business.
Yeah.
And you end up being the personal trainer who gets to $100,000 or 120, or maybe become a top trainer earning maybe $150,000. But then 5 years later, you're still earning the same money because you're pulling all the cream off the top for lifestyle and for for gadgets and for gimmicks. How much of your success has come down to your ability to be able to, and this is going to sound small, play a smaller game with the goal of playing something bigger? And what I mean by that is because oftentimes people entrepreneurship is celebrity now. Like, and every man and their dog who's got an Instagram account, they're a business owner. And so oftentimes they think, well, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I need to look like an entrepreneur. I need to dress like an entrepreneur. I need to drive an entrepreneur's car. I need to go on entrepreneurial like holidays. And so as a result, they end up redlining their entire financial capabilities through this process of trying to grow a business. And as a result, they either end up defunct or on a dance floor that they can't actually get off. And I know for myself and for a lot of our successful clients that we work with, we are very big on war chesting. We're very big on, just having very basic lives. As a side note, I've got about 400 high-end clients with turnovers between 1 million up to 300 million, and not one of them is a Ferrari driving suit wearing, Lamborghini admiring client. Not that they don't admire nice things, but they've learned how to use their money in intelligent ways with a long-term perspective. How much of that is your success? How much have you been able to stay away from the shiny objectitis to be able to focus on reinvestment? Or did you get sucked into it? Because I know I did at some point in the journey and learn some lessons and come out the other side. Or have you always been quite good at just taking what you need to get by and reinvesting the rest?
Oh, man, I wish I could say that I was. Early on, I saw a little bit of success and became a little excessive. Not with everything, because I'm not excessive with clothes, stuff like that. It's not really a big deal to me, but did get an expensive car, did get the expensive apartment. And fortunately, you can get out of the apartment in a year, but the car, not so much. And so I would say it was irresponsible, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. But for me,
was it a good lesson? Was it a lifelong valuable lesson that had to be invested in order to gain it?
Yeah. I remember I got a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and it was leather. It was limited edition. I bought it cash for $3,300 and I was debt free. But then I got a raise at work and I ended up trading it in for a F-150 lifted, mud tires and leather interior. And then now I had a payment for 6 years, but I had the cool truck that I wanted in high school. And I wouldn't necessarily take that back because that's something I wanted for years, but I couldn't afford it. And it hurt, but it pressured me to get to the next level. And I remember there was a time at the gym I was working at the time, the sales management role was up for grabs. It was me and another guy fighting for this thing. And honestly, if it wasn't for some of the financial expectations that I had for myself, I may not have gotten it because I had to win regardless. So again, I wouldn't recommend it because that's a variable tool. But for me, it motivated me, but it did teach me a lot. I'm different now, right? I have a paid off truck, and I'm going to trade it in and pay cash for my next electric vehicle in January of 2022, right? I'm a lot wiser with my finances because I've learned those lessons of like, dang, I shouldn't have done that, because I had the truck and I don't remember feeling that much cooler, especially not in equal weight to the cost, like.
Well, let me ask you a question, because I call this the 2-week rule. And because I know I went through this when I went through my excessive phase of, suits, cars and watches. I thought something was missing. And so then I'd buy it and then I'd feel amazing for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, I'd be like, fuck, man, nothing's really changed. Did you have periods like that where you would get something and then after a while, you're like, man, the shine is gone?
100%. Still get that from time to time, just with less excessive things. You see something on Amazon that's like a new foam roller and you're like, this is no different than, but unfortunately they're like $60 now or something. I did have the Michael Kors watches and the nice dress shoes. And I remember buying those things. I'm like, I just bought this because I saw someone else with it at the club. And now, if anything, I feel worse because it's not me. Like, I don't need a 5-pound watch on, like this is uncomfortable. It just looks weird. And I'm attracting the type of girls that I'm not even really into.
Yeah.
So for me, it was an eye opener, and it took a little while. And I think that speaks to like the circles that you spend your time in too. We could probably go in a totally different direction there, but when you're trying to fit in with the wrong people, you're going to spend the wrong money.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think it's often something that people talk about, but they don't necessarily, because people say, if you take the 5 people that you spend the most time with and you divide their income add all their incomes up, divided by 5, that'll be your number within about 10%. Now, there's a lot of truth in that, but I also think there's a lot of misunderstanding, because people think, well, I just got to hang out with 5 people who earn more money than me. If that's the key to success, then is that all I've got to do? What are some of the lessons you've learned around who you spend time with? And I don't just mean from a networking perspective. I mean from a community perspective. I mean from a relationship, a connection perspective. What are some of the big lessons you've learned around that?
And I can't remember the last time I thought about a friendship in terms of their income, or even pursued a new friendship or an existing friendship because of their success. The things that I am attracted to now in my life are character attributes, they're virtues. I've gone through some shit in my life, and I've had deep depression periods where if it wasn't for 1 or 2 guys in my circle, who I don't even know how much money they make now, we've been friends for years. If they weren't there for me emotionally, and not just to hear me cry, but to lift me up, to encourage me, to say, Jared, what are you complaining about? Like, depending on the period, right? To smack me upside the head when I go back out with that same girl or whatever it is, So I look for character traits and virtues, man. I look for people that I want to be more like, not that I want to be as wealthy as. But fortunately, these are successful people. It's just not what draws me to them. But I think, your character traits and obviously your business acumen, you combine those things and you've probably got a good future ahead. And so for me, that's what I look for. And that's what's made me a better person, because money is, anybody can make money, but to be a person that you like to spend time with, like to love yourself. And I don't want to get hyper spiritual here, but there's a lot of rich people out there that have horrible characters. And there was a period of time where I was making money and I felt empty. And I thought, well, how does this add up? And I was sleeping around. I was living there's nothing wrong with that, but like I was treating people badly. Everyone was a means to an end for me. And at the end of the day, I did not like myself. And I looked at the circle that I had and I thought, well, there's no wonder, one, I'm acting this way, and no wonder I'm attracting those type of people, because I'm that type of person and I need to change. And so I made a conscious effort to pursue people that I wanted to be more like. And it was more like, I want to be kind. I want to be generous. I want to be intelligent. I want to be wise. I want to be a financial steward. My circle, I'm probably the most irrational financial person in my circle, because I got a group of great guys that I've fought to become friends with over the years. And now, I can lean on them for anything. So I highly recommend pursuing the people that you want to be like, not that you want to have what they have tangibly.
Relationships, how have they influenced your ability to produce success? And what are the biggest lessons you've learned around that, being a young, virile young man?
Oh, man. So I've learned a lot. Well, a bit of transparency here. Like I mentioned earlier, I grew up for a period of time without my mom. And I think psychologically that affected the way that I do relationships for a period of time. And met a girl 2015. I had dated on and off, and I've always been pretty good at getting the type of girls that I like, I guess you could say. And I'm a people person, so for whatever that's worth. And met the girl, fell in love right away, and she ended up being Looney Tune and really toxic and controlling. But I let it ride. For sometimes men, at least, we can think with different entities, and so that certainly affected. I'm probably gonna write a book about it one day. But it made me. I don't know how to explain it, but it put me in overdrive to prove to her and to the world that I can truly become successful. Because she met me during that time where I'd quit my job and then the gym didn't work. So I was like rock bottom, all things considered. And she was not, for sure she's bipolar. And so one day she's like, "You're the greatest, Jared. You can do anything you put your mind to." And I'm like, "What? That's awesome. I'm going to do that." And then the next day she's like, "You shouldn't do that. You're not capable of that. You're just like your dad, da, 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 da." And I'm like, "I'm going to prove you wrong now." And so there was a lot of that back and forth for a couple of years, and praise God, we're not even remotely doing that anymore. It's been a couple of years now. So, but for the first couple of years of my entrepreneurial journey, starting Superfit, even with recreating friendships, and it was like, man, screw this girl. I'm gonna prove her wrong. I can do all these things. And then on the days that she was like, "Jared, you're capable of anything," I'm like, "You're right." So there's something to say about overcoming some type of toxic relationship. And fortunately, I think the key to that is not having a victim mentality. I was always ready to persevere and prove the world wrong. And when I met her, it was like, well, I'm going to prove her wrong while I'm at it. And maybe it was some type of weird mommy problems or something. Who knows, right?
Well, look, I think we don't always get the person we want at the time. We always get the person we need for that period. And it seems to me that she reflected some pretty solid stuff back at you that helped you learn. And I'm certainly one that has the belief that relationships are a reason, a season, a lifetime. But sometimes we attract certain types of relationships to show us attributes and the virtues that we know we want, and sometimes we are attracting certain people that have attributes and virtues to go, you know what? Yeah, now that I've experienced that, I've realized I don't want that. But sometimes from afar, it might appear like an attractive trait. Mate, I've really enjoyed our conversation so far. I'm gonna finish off with 2 more questions. Number 1, what's the biggest mistake that you've made in business, and what did you learn? And this can be a life mistake. This can be a business mistake.
I say it's the biggest mistake, but I wouldn't be here without it. But is not vetting my partnerships.
Yeah, nice.
Bad partnerships have costed me to date about $331,000. So when people go into business these days, even when I'm consulting 2 best buddies and they want to do a thing, I'm like, man, you guys need to really make sure you're going to get married. This is a marriage. And do you want to be married to this guy or this girl? And the only way out of this is for a sale or for a toxic breakup, man. And so that's a lesson that I've learned, and I've had to learn it 3 times to really get the picture. And that's just kind of how I learn lessons sometimes. Me too. You really got to vet your partnerships. Don't let emotions drive the inception of whatever business you're going to pursue.
I guess we hear this word bandied around a lot, and to me, it's like the word entrepreneur. Sometimes if we use a word too much, it loses its meaning, especially if it's used in a generalized context. And one of the things that I've observed in life and in nature is every organism on this planet was put here for a specific reason. Whether it be a microbe, an ant, a bee, a butterfly, a bird, a dog, a horse. All beings serve a purpose, a purpose to do something, to provide something as a part of the ecosystem. Humans are a little bit of an unusual animal whereby we have these frontal lobes. We have the ability to be able to think, discern, we have free will. But from your perspective, based on the life that you've led so far, what have you learnt about why you are here? What is the purpose of you being on Earth? Why do you exist?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question, and the answer, just like the question, is not super simple. I I have a few missions in life. So I'll sort of read to you my long version of that. I think that I'm here to encourage, educate, and empower others to live happier, healthier lives. But that's vague. So more specifically, I don't want to just help people. I want to put resources in their hand so that they can help themselves. I think, like you mentioned, the human is capable of far greater than what the majority of us are taking advantage of, despite our IQ or anything like that. And at the end of the day, because I'm passionate about fitness, I want to leave a legacy that makes fitness affordable, attractive, and accessible for everyone in the world. And that's what I want to be known for.
Jared, that's an incredibly well thought out answer. Mate, I've got to say, I've really enjoyed this conversation. If people want to find out more about you, you've just released a book, The 6 Practical Ways to Never Stop Growing, which I believe is on Kindle. Where can people find about you? Where can they find out about the book? Where can they find you?
So I'm most active on Instagram. It's at Jared AXL Graybeal. My website is jaredgraybeal.com. You can get the self-help book, 6 Practical Ways to Never Stop Growing, on Amazon or anywhere online that books are sold. And yeah, you can find out all about me on those platforms.
Fantastic. Jared Graybeal, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being on Unstoppable, mate. Really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me, man. It's been great.
This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way. And we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology. We're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com.